History is full of nations that rose quickly, grabbed global attention in the modern era, and then vanished just as fast. Unlike the ancient empires that collapsed centuries ago, these were states remembered within living memory, nations born from wars, uprisings, or political experiments that couldn't endure. In this video, we'll dive into 15 modern countries that no longer exist and explore why they appeared on the world stage and what ultimately led to their disappearance. Number 15, Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary, or as we should call it officially, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was a dominant European power in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It was created in 1867 by the Great Austro-Hungarian Compromise, and it worked as a dual monarchy. Austria and Hungary ruled equally under a single emperor. This shift came after Austria's loss to Prussia in 1866, which reduced its role in German affairs and forced a new balance with Hungary. The empire spanned much of Central and Eastern Europe and included present-day Austria-Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and large parts of Poland, Romania, Ukraine, and Italy. Its population was deeply diverse. We mean there were Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, Croats, Serbs, Romanians, Poles, Ukrainians, Slovenes, Italians, and Jews who lived together, but of course not always peacefully. While cities like Vienna and Budapest thrived, nationalist unrest grew. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 triggered World War I. Military defeats and ethnic uprisings unraveled the empire, and by 1918, Austria-Hungary dissolved. Its collapse redrew borders and left lasting regional tensions. Number 14. Rhodesia. Rhodesia was an unrecognized country in southern Africa that existed from 1965 to 1979 in what is now Zimbabwe. It was named after British colonialist Cecil Rhodes and governed by a white minority determined to prevent majority rule. Originally, it was a British colony of southern Rhodesia since 1923, but then the region developed a large European settler population that somehow retained political and economic power. As Britain decolonized Africa post-World War II, Rhodesia's white leadership resisted democratic reform. On November 11, 1965, Prime Minister Ian Smith issued a unilateral declaration of independence, declaring Rhodesia a sovereign state without British consent. It was instantly condemned worldwide. Sanctions isolated the regime, and it remained diplomatically unrecognized. Despite support from South Africa and Portugal, Rhodesia faced economic strain and escalating civil conflict. The Rhodesian Bush War pitted Smith's government against African liberation groups led by Robert Mugabe and Joshua Nkomo. In 1979, peace talks in London produced the Lancaster House Agreement. In 1980, Zimbabwe replaced Rhodesia. It's the same, just the name is changed. Number 13. The Kingdom of Hawaii. While now part of the United States, Hawaii was once an independent kingdom until the late 19th century. Its takeover by the United States in 1898 stripped it of sovereignty and remains a point of ongoing political and historical debate. The Kingdom of Hawaii was founded in 1795 by King Kamehameha, who united the islands through both warfare and diplomacy. For most of the 19th century, Hawaii operated as a globally recognized monarchy, maintaining formal diplomatic ties with powers like Britain, France, and the US, and entering into international agreements. Its economy became closely tied to sugar production, bringing significant investment from both American and European settlers. Foreign influence expanded over time, and the monarchy faced pressure to serve outside business interests. In 1887, King Kalakaua was forced to accept the Bayonet Constitution, weakening royal power and empowering U.S. planters. This paved the way for the 1893 coup and eventually Hawaii's annexation in 1898. Number 12. The West Indies Federation. This was a not-so-long political union in the Caribbean. We mean it existed from 1958 to 1962 only. It was designed to unify 10 British Caribbean colonies into a single independent state. The aim was to reduce fragmentation and create a stronger regional presence as the end of British colonial rule approached. The federation included Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Kitts, Nevis and Guia, and Montserrat. Port of Spain served as the temporary capital. Despite massive hopes, the federation was plagued by internal disagreements. Larger islands like Jamaica and Trinidad often clashed with smaller members over funding and political weight. The structure also lacked centralized authority, limiting its effectiveness. In 1961, Jamaica held a referendum and voted to withdraw, citing minimal benefits and disproportionate burdens. Trinidad soon followed. The federation formally dissolved in 1962. While the political union failed, its legacy shaped the region's move toward independence. Most members later became sovereign nations. Number 11. The Federation of Malaya. This was also a short-lived country in Southeast Asia that lasted from 1948 until 1963. It played a key transitional role between British colonial rule and the creation of modern-day Malaysia. After World War II, British forces returned to a Japanese-occupied Malaya and in 1946 introduced the Malayan Union. That proposal faced heavy opposition for undermining the traditional powers of Malay rulers and extending citizenship to non-Malays. In response, Britain replaced it with the Federation of Malaya in 1948, restoring royal authority and limiting citizenship. At the same time, the region entered the Malayan Emergency, a guerrilla war fought against communist insurgents. The emergency shaped the Federation's early years through counterinsurgency efforts and massive resettlements. Despite ongoing conflict, the Federation progressed toward self-governance. In 1957, under Tunku Abdul Rahman, it achieved full independence. 6 years later, the Federation merged with Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak to form Malaysia. Though the Federation of Malaya no longer exists, its legacy formed Malaysia's political and institutional base. Number 10. East Germany. East Germany, officially the German Democratic Republic, was a state that existed from 1949 until 1990 in what had been the eastern part of unified Germany. Its creation followed Germany's 1945 defeat and the Cold War's start. The Allies split Germany into 4 zones: American, British, French, and Soviet. The Western zones merged into the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, by May 1949. That October, the Soviet zone became the GDR. Though Berlin was inside Soviet territory, it was also divided, becoming a flashpoint in Cold War politics. The GDR was a Soviet-aligned socialist state under one-party rule by the Socialist Unity Party. It nationalized industries, collectivized farming, and built a planned economy. While industrial output was high, consumer goods and freedoms lagged far behind the West. In 1961, East Germany built the Berlin Wall to stop millions fleeing westward. In 1989, mass protests surged, leading to the wall's fall. By October 1990, East Germany ceased to exist and reunified with the West. Number 9. The United Arab Republic. The UAR was a political union between Egypt and Syria that lasted from 1958 to 1961. It emerged during the height of Arab nationalism and represented a bold attempt at regional unity. Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser, a central figure in Pan-Arabism, aimed to unite Arab countries under a single political banner. Syria, dealing with internal instability and the threat of communism, proposed a merger. The UAR was formed in February 1958. Though symbolic of unity, serious imbalances emerged. Egypt, being much larger, dominated the union politically and economically. Syrian officials were sidelined and Cairo dictated most policy decisions. Egyptian-style socialist reforms, including land redistribution and nationalization, unsettled Syrian elites. Tensions grew as political pluralism in Syria eroded. On September 28, 1961, a military coup in Syria ended the union. Egypt retained the UAR name until 1971, but the experiment had failed. The UAR's brief life became a lasting example of the challenges of pan-Arab unification. Number 8. Czechoslovakia. It was a Central European country that lasted from 1918 until the very end of 1992, when it peacefully split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Its formation reflected the collapse of empires after World War I, while its end mirrored Cold War transformations. The country was formed in October 1918 as Austria-Hungary crumbled, uniting Bohemia, Moravia, and Slovakia. It was home to Czechs and Slovaks alongside German, Hungarian, Ruthenian, and Polish minorities. Between the wars, it grew into one of Europe's most stable democracies, with a strong economy and infrastructure. But Nazi Germany's 1938 annexation of the Sudetenland, followed by a full occupation, ended its independence. After World War II, Czechoslovakia was reborn but fell under Soviet control in 1948. The 1968 Prague Spring reform effort was crushed by a Warsaw Pact invasion. In 1989, the Velvet Revolution ended communist rule. By 1993, political leaders agreed to divide the state. The Velvet Divorce formed two nations, peacefully, without bloodshed. But as an old once said, humans love blowing things up, so peace doesn't last long. Number 7. Sikkim. Sikkim was a small Himalayan kingdom that remained an independent nation after British rule in India ended, but was annexed by India in 1975. Its disappearance as a sovereign state is one of the most unusual examples of a modern nation being absorbed into a larger neighbor during the 20th century. The Namgyal dynasty had ruled Sikkim since the 1600s. Bordered by India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Tibet, it became a British protectorate but retained autonomy. After India gained a win in 1947, Sikkim chose a protectorate arrangement. India controlled defense and foreign policy, while the Chogyal or king governed internal affairs. Over time, tensions rose between the monarchy and the majority Nepali-speaking population. By the 1970s, protests erupted demanding democratic reform. In 1973, India intervened, backed constitutional changes, and reduced the king's power. In 1975, Sikkim held a referendum. The result favored joining India. On May 16, India annexed Sikkim. Though now a state of India, its annexation remains debated in terms of legitimacy and autonomy. Number 6. The Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was one of the world's most significant powers for centuries, but by the early 20th century, its collapse became inevitable. At its height, the empire controlled vast areas across Southeast Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. By the 1800s, it was referred to as the sick man of Europe, weakened by internal decline and increasing foreign influence. Britain, France, and Russia competed for control over their lands. During World War I, the Ottomans joined the Central Powers, hoping to reverse their losses. Instead, they suffered defeats across multiple fronts. Arab revolts, British campaigns, and military exhaustion shattered the empire's hold. In 1920, the Treaty of Sèvres attempted to partition Ottoman territory, but Turkish nationalists led by Mustafa Kemal rejected it. In 1923, the Republic of Turkey was founded. The Sultanate ended in 1922, and the Caliphate was abolished in 1924. Though the political empire vanished, its culture still shapes modern-day Turkey and the broader region. Number 5. Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was a Southeast European country that existed in various forms throughout the 20th century until its final breakup in the early 2000s. It was originally built in 1918 as the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, following the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In 1929, it was renamed Yugoslavia, meaning Land of the South Slavs. While intended as a symbol of unity, deep-rooted ethnic divisions between Serbs, Croats, Slovenes, Bosniaks, Macedonians, and Montenegrins persisted. During World War II, the country was invaded by the Axis powers and fractured into occupied zones. Communist partisans led by Josip Broz Tito defeated the occupiers and abolished the monarchy. In 1945, Yugoslavia was re-established as a socialist federation of 6 republics. Tito ruled with a firm hand, promoting a unified identity and remaining independent from the Soviet Union. After he died in 1980, nationalism surged. By the early 1990s, violent separatist wars split the country. By 2006, Yugoslavia had fully dissolved into 7 separate nations. Number 4. Tibet. Tibet's mid-20th century history stands as one of the most visible cases of a state that operated with full independence, yet was ultimately absorbed by a more powerful neighbor. Although long influenced by China, Tibet functioned independently after the Qing dynasty's fall in 1911. The 13th Dalai Lama expelled Chinese officials and declared autonomy in 1912. Tibet printed currency, ran its own government from Lhasa, and maintained international trade. However, most global powers, including Britain and the US, didn't formally recognize its independence, leaving its status vulnerable. In 1950, the People's Liberation Army invaded eastern Tibet. Ill-equipped Tibetan forces were defeated. In 1951, the Tibetan government signed the 17-point agreement under pressure, accepting Chinese sovereignty with promises of autonomy. Tensions rose as China pushed for reforms. In March 1959, an uprising in Lhasa was crushed by Chinese forces. The 14th Dalai Lama fled to India, where he established a government in exile. In 1965, Tibet was formally integrated into China as the Tibet Autonomous Region. Number 3. Biafra. It was a breakaway republic in southeastern Nigeria that existed from 1967 to 1970. Its birth and collapse were deeply tied to ethnic conflict, post-colonial instability, and the devastating Nigerian Civil War. Nigeria gained independence from Britain in 1960 as a federation of competing ethnic and regional blocs. The 3 major groups were the Hausa Fulani in the north, Yoruba in the west, and Igbo in the east. Political instability, military coups and violence, particularly against Igbos living in the north, pushed regional tensions to a breaking point. On May 30th, 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu declared the eastern region independent as the Republic of Biafra. Nigeria's federal government responded with military force, sparking a brutal 3-year war. Though Biafran forces initially held ground, they were eventually surrounded and blockaded. International aid was limited. The conflict claimed over 1 million lives, many through famine. On January 15, 1970, Biafra surrendered. Although it disappeared, the legacy of Biafra still fuels ongoing discussions around Igbo identity and autonomy. Now let's move to number 2, South Yemen. South Yemen. Officially, the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen was a Marxist state in southern Arabia that existed from 1967 until its unification with North Yemen in 1990. The story began in the port city of Aden, a British colony since 1839. Britain later extended control into neighboring protectorates. By the 1960s, anti-colonial resistance escalated, especially from the National Liberation Front and the Front for the Liberation of Occupied South Yemen. In 1967, the British withdrew and the NLF took control, declaring independence. In 1970, South Yemen adopted a Marxist-Leninist model, becoming the only openly communist Arab country. It nationalized industries, restructured society, and aligned with the Soviet bloc. Relations with North Yemen were unstable, and South Yemen also faced internal power struggles, most notably the 1986 civil conflict that left thousands dead. Economic hardship and Soviet decline pushed toward reunification. On May 22, 1990, South and North Yemen united. Despite unification, conflicts persist and southern separatist sentiment remains strong to this day. Number 1. East Pakistan. East Pakistan was the eastern division of Pakistan from 1955 to 1971. Its formation and eventual separation revealed how cultural, linguistic, and economic divides can fracture a state built without acknowledging regional identity. After British India's 1947 partition, Pakistan emerged as a nation for Muslims, but was split into 2 parts separated by over 1,000 miles of Indian territory. West Pakistan, today's Pakistan, and East Pakistan, today's Bangladesh, shared religion but had sharp differences in culture, language, and economy. East Pakistan had the larger population, mainly Bengali-speaking, yet political dominance stayed in the west, especially Punjab. Language disputes intensified tensions when Urdu was imposed nationally. The 1952 Dhaka protests led to deadly police violence, solidifying Bengali resistance. Though renamed East Pakistan in 1955, the region remained politically sidelined. After the 1970 elections, the Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, won a majority. West Pakistan's military rejected their mandate, launching a brutal crackdown in March 1971, igniting a war that ended with Bangladesh's independence in December 1971. Well, history is strange, and so like it we. If you enjoyed what you've just seen, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll catch you soon.